Good morning to all of you. Salam alaikum. It's wonderful to be here. Thank you so much for being with us. This is an extraordinary conference, first time, and I have an extraordinary panel. So it's a real honor for me to be here. We're going to be talking about the science of digital well-being. Please, gentlemen, sit down. I'm going to quickly introduce everyone and make sure that you know who's here and who's talking about what. Jim Steyer joins us. Jim, of course, is the founder and CEO of Common Sense Media. And the name alone, I just absolutely love it, because it's probably something we don't see enough of. And I think in the digital world, we probably need to see a little bit more. Sunil John also joins us. Of course, Sunil is the president for the MENA region here, ASDA'A, Burston Marsteller. So as always, lovely to see you. And Gawdat joining us as well, author, entrepreneur, former the chief business officer with Google, so he can bring technology and talent and tenacity, and he can bring everything into one for us. I'd like to start with Sunil, if I may, because Sunil has actually worked very closely with Eithne on this great piece of work here, this great piece of research that, yes, we have a wonderful magazine here, but we're also going to make sure it's distributed digitally, so you can read both, whatever you fancy. But there's a lot of work that has gone into it, a lot of care, a lot of passion, a lot of commitment from all of the team with Eithne, and it's great that the director highlighted it earlier, but now we're going to hear just a little bit. So if you would tell us just, you know, Sunil, why did you put it together, what's in it, and what were your findings? Any surprises?
Well, as Abdullah mentioned earlier in his opening remarks, you know, there were some fairly expected findings, but there were quite some surprises too. I think it's very interesting because a report of this nature was never done before, and I think the fact that Eithne and the Sync initiative actually went ahead and did this, there is something like a framework to look at, and I think that's the big advantage of doing this. And I think people talk about you know, digital well-being, but it's a subject that not many people take seriously. And I think when we live our lives today, the digital technology is central to everything we do. And Jim, we were talking before as well, where we say, I think the fact that we need to be able to develop a framework for which we need to see what is the user perspective, which is what this report is all about, the user perspective. But the subject of our panel is about the science behind digital well-being, and it's about time that we looked at it. And my fellow panelists, Gawdat and Jim here, are experts on this, and I'll depend on bringing that aspect here. So very quickly, the top findings. Before I get to that, quick methodology, I think Abdullah did mention the methodology. We went to 30 different countries across all continents. We had 500 interviews per country, so 15,000 interviews during June, July of 2021, fairly recent. And what we asked them is a whole range of questions that of the subject, and in fact, the sample included Gen Zs, millennials, Gen X, and of course the boomers as well. So you're looking at a different set of age groups here. But quick findings, Jim, headlines, as you said. The first top one, is technology a force for good? 88% of the entire sample across the world said, yes, a force for good, for global good and positive progress. There was a further positive feeling that during the pandemic, technology came to their rescue. Some 64% of the respondents said technology helped them tackle the pandemic even better. So that's one side of the equation. But then we further probed into asking people, so are you concerned about this growing prevalence of digital in your life? And clearly unquestionable benefits of digital technology, but some 48% of the respondents in the survey said they spend more time online than they would like to. That's nearly half the sample said we spend far too much time than we would like to. Additionally, some 37% admitted they find it difficult to separate their work and their social lives, and that's a growing concern. So, having looked at the positive side and the concerns, we then looked at is how difficult is it to disengage. And here, some 66% said they use social media from about an hour or more or 4 hours. See, 38% said 1 to 4 hours, 28% said more than 4 hours. Some 66% of the sample across this world say they spend a majority of their time looking at their screens, the screen time. Just imagine the time spent there. And they said they find it difficult to disengage. The 2 top reasons for that is exciting content. There's so much coming there. And the second, very, very interesting, FOMO, the fear of missing out. Those were the 2 top reasons why people did not want, that they found it difficult to disengage. The final finding is we asked them, what is the impact on your well-being? And when we say well-being, we talk of physical well-being, we talk of mental well-being. It is, in fact, a very important subject. And 40% of the global sample said they were concerned. Shockingly, 51% said they admitted to skipping sleep on a weekly basis to remain glued to their online screens. And when we look specifically at Gen Zs, the youngest part of the group, nearly 70% said they skip sleep on a daily basis. And that, as you know, sleep deprivation leads to more, as we were talking, of depression, of anxiety, of not being able to focus on things. And I think this final point is on parenting, the impact on parenting. Abdullah, you talked of your son Ibrahim and how you put him outside looking at, but then you finally got him there. But look at how parents among the sample said, 33% of the sample said they use digital technologies to occupy their children while they are focused on day-to-day tasks. It's the best way to keep the kids busy. Additionally, some 44% of the parents in the sample said that they let their children use smartphones unsupervised. You can well imagine the impact of unsupervised content without parental control on young, impressionable minds. These are some of the top findings I wanted to share with you. There are more, and hopefully with Eithne, and do look at it. The digital copy is available, and I really congratulate ETreanor and the Sync initiative to have invested and got this report out, because then we have a framework for discussion on the science of well-being. Sorry, I did take a little longer.
No, it's very powerful, and I think we wanted to put it in perspective to make sure that all of you could see what was going on there and some interesting findings. And you'll notice none of us have our digital tools with us today, so we're back to pen and paper. And of course, all of my dear panel too, they've written books. They've written great books on, you know, what they talk about, what they think about. Jim, I want to bring you in. Interesting, negative or positive, but also, you know, which side of history is this going to be on? I'm going to have a great read on this, but just one of the books that you write, and also Common Sense Media, something that, you know, we're very familiar with schools in America, in Europe, in other areas, maybe schools, we're going to see more of Common Sense Media here in the region. But also you have another report, a census, really, a research report, that shows the use particularly among, I suppose, that vulnerable age group, you know, the tweens and teens, in terms of their further use, and sort of come back to your research again in terms of measuring how this makes a difference.
So if you look at kids and teens, which is the focus of Common Sense Media, we look at everybody, but we really look at kids and teens. And I should have started by saying salam alaikum to everyone. Thank you for having me. During the pandemic, this is the United States alone, tweens, that's 8 to 12-year-olds, spend about 5.5 hours a day in screen time. I was listening earlier to Abdullah's early statements about stuff. But the average teen in the United States, tween, 8 to 12, 5.5 hours a day. The average teenager in the United States, 8.5 hours a day. That's more time than they're doing anything else. So their lives are defined 24/7 by the screens, by the content. It's why the content matters. It's why rules matter. And it's why we're all talking about digital well-being, because it's transformed everybody's life. As you said at the beginning, friend or foe, I think it's both. And I think from a kid's standpoint, you really have to look at the mental health issues, the addiction issues, the attention distraction issues that affect their brains. My students at Stanford University do not write as well as they did 15 years ago. I guarantee you that. So this is an extraordinary moment. I'm so glad we're having this conference, but very, very mixed bag.
I think, again, and you know, the content that we're going to see over the next 2 days really is quite phenomenal. I think every one of these areas is going to be looked at in detail, again, with many of the experts here in our audience. But Mo, you come from a technology background, and you've transformed in many ways yourself, whereby happiness, you know, is very much your focus. We're going to talk about the science, of course, but again, is this measurable? Is it predictable? And are we even happy? You know, being absorbed and sort of, you know, caught up with the whole digital world.
Are we happy? Anyone?
It's up and down.
Yeah, right. So first of all, such an honor to be with you. I don't know if I've been granted the Saudi citizenship a couple of months ago, so I feel I'm among family. Very, very grateful to be with you. Thank you. Are we happy? I think actually an understanding of our Arabic language makes it quite interesting. Huh? So if I ask you how you are, normally we answer bkhair. Huh? Bkhair is a lot more than just happy. Huh? Well-being is a lot more than happiness. It's I'm happy, I'm contented, I'm peaceful, I'm healthy, I'm fit, I'm connected, and so on and so forth. And I think what we do in our world is as we measure those individual components, we realize, as you know, my esteemed colleagues have said, that we have an issue almost on every one of them. Right, and when you start to look at each of them, we sort of handle them in an intervention way. You know, when we talk about mental health, for example, we wait until people are suffering, and then we try to fix it. Now, an engineer will say that's a very bad design. Right, a good design would be to actually try and prevent it, to try and find ways where it doesn't break. Okay, and you know, with the limited time we have, I'd say it's actually quite measurable. So all of those things, you know, in my work, I discuss something that I call the equations of emotions, right? And every one of those negative emotions or positive emotions that we feel is highly predictable. We're perhaps, with the exception of unconditional love, but all of the others are very measurable. Happiness, for example, as per my first book, is events minus expectations. We don't feel unhappy when a certain event happens. We feel unhappy when the event is translated into our head, into a picture of that event and compare it to how we want life to be. Okay, and if the expectation is missed, we feel unhappy. If we go online and expect to have 7 likes on our Instagram post, but we have 3 and a bad comment, the expectation is missed. Right? If we go online and expect that the world is going to be amazing and that the news is going to be telling us that everything's fine and everyone is dancing, the expectation is missed, right? We see all of the violence, all of the wars, and so on and so forth. So my top point, and maybe we continue the conversation, is there is nothing wrong with the tech, okay? There's nothing wrong with the environment. There is a lot wrong with how we use it and how we engage with it, okay? And it's highly predictable that if we manage to morph the way this technology is used, it can be for our benefit rather than for our pain.
Jim, I see that questioning look on your face, please.
Well, I mean, Mo, I know the folks who run your former company, Google, very well, and the folks who run all the big tech companies. And I would tell you, you use the word design. And the products are designed not for happiness and not for well-being. They're designed to make a lot of money and to keep you engaged. So it's very important that you understand, I'll use kids examples. If your kids are on YouTube or TikTok or Snapchat, those products, many of whom were designed by my students at Stanford, are specifically designed to keep you there and keep you plugged in 24/7. This is not just a random act of happiness or I'm spending time there. They're extremely crafted for the desire. Basically, you are the product. You have to remember, with advertising-based platforms like Facebook or Google, you are the product. It's your information and private personal data that's being sold. So the design is critical, and I would argue that some of this discussion, both the pros and the cons of tech, has got to be made to the people who run the companies who design products that are not designed with well-being in mind. They're designed with, how do I keep you there and keep you there as long as possible?
Absolutely. A ball is designed for a kid to run 24 hours. Kids don't run 24 hours for intervention reasons. Now, if our expectation is that the companies will change their design, that's very wishful thinking. The truth is they will continue to find ways to design it that way. It's in our hands how to use the ball. It's in our hands how many hours we spend on Instagram. It's up to us to make those choices. If the expectation is that this conference is somehow going to make Google change their design, I think that's wishful thinking.
But also, I mean, I think, you know, with or without social media, when we go into a shopping mall or a supermarket, it's all designed to bring us around this way. Yep. When we look at television, it's all designed to feed us more information, even the old-fashioned stuff, you know.
Right.
So,
absolutely.
I mean, I think the consequence, if we're happy on it, is great for us. So again, I come back to a bit of choice. But yeah, and it's hard because it's, you know, hitting vulnerable people, you know, and consumers right across the board. Sunil, come in terms of the force for good, the force for evil, let's not say, let's hope not, but the force for danger there. Where are the, you know, the big signs? And I mean, you talked about, you know, isolation, you know, connectivity is something we all want, we all need. We have it, you know, we're not going to give up on it. But, you know, bring us into, you know, how it's impacting mental health. And again, if we can measure that, how can we maybe prevent rather than fix it? And I'll come back to you in a moment, Mo.
Sure, sure. Force for good, force for evil. I don't know how many of you remember, I'm sure Mo knows this. One of the mission statements of Google was, remember, do no evil. You know, I don't know what their intentions were, but I tell you, it's pretty funny.
But there's a lot of words that are underneath that.
Oh, big time.
Evil's the big one.
Yeah,
so.
I mean, these social media platforms, as you said, Jim, are designed to keep you there to make more money. So there's no question. And then whatever, you know, they say, whatever Mark Zuckerberg says in his impassioned pleas to the Congress, they are going to continue to do that. But what is its impact, especially on the youth, on children, is something we really need to look at, because we have seen that impacting, and it's just a growing, for sure, my personal opinion almost an epidemic that's starting. And I think the fact that many of these young people have lost their social skills to live in the real world, and I can see that many of you have kids or, you know, young relatives, they find it very difficult to adjust in the real life. And that is something we asked these people as well across in these 15 countries. And another data point, 61% of the respondents said that online addiction should be considered a medical condition. Now, that is an important finding, that they know that there is a problem. And then when we asked for solutions, we actually said, you know, they asked, should governments play a role? Should there be some control? Should it be parental control, or should it be more than parental control? 50% agreed that government should provide more resources if someone wants help with technology addiction or online addiction. You know, 75% said that they should have increased access to high quality, affordable care for online addiction. So those are, I mean, I think people know there is a problem, but, you know, they haven't given it the importance. And summits such as this should make an impact. The governments, policymakers, parents, community in general should take this issue and look at it. It's not as if you throw technology out. You cannot. It's so much part of our lives, and it does brilliantly, you know. I mean, the fact is, 7 billion population, 3.6 billion of them are untouched. They have no internet. Imagine if this problem is doubled. I think we should learn these things and make sure that the other 3.6 do not go through these same issues. And I think that's the question, that's the main question that this summit should be looking at.
And of course, I mean, all of those people aspire to be digitally connected and deserve to be as well. But again, Anas mentioned earlier the concept of discipline. Now, maybe you and I have discipline, but again, we look at a lot of the younger population, but they're brought up on these machines, so they don't quite turn off as quickly, or they don't think about perhaps turning off as maybe we might, just because we've now read all this and we're aware. But again, talk to us a little bit about the downside, because there is a downside.
A ton of downside. I mean, the idea is like every other tool. I can use this pen to take notes, and I can use it to poke you in the eye. I won't, but you know, the idea is that it's the same tool, right? And the downside is significant. The reality is that we're losing all social skills. We're in constant fear and anxiety. We are, you know, constantly unhappy, I would probably say. The teen suicide is at an all-time high. And it's not to be ignored. But once again, those things are highly predictable. I mean, Take fear, for example. Fear is a simple equation. A moment in the future is a little less safe than a moment right now. You know, anxiety is, I know that the moment in the future is unsafe for me, but I don't know what to do about it. Okay? We allow our kids to get to despair, which is, I am unhappy and I don't see any way out. I believe I will be unhappy for a very long time, and that leads to teen suicide. Now, here's the trick. The trick is, I hosted Neil Eyal, who is the author of a book called Undistractable, on my podcast. And he spoke about very specific reasons why we reach out to that phone, right? The reasons of, like Sunil rightly said, fear of missing out, or the reasons of feeling socially disconnected, and so on and so forth. And I think the reality of the matter is that if we understand those scientific issues, we should be able to not design the tech. And by the way, I agree 100%, Jem. Those tools are stickiness tools, right? Yes. The challenge for us as a community should be, as content creators, can we use those tools to create positive content rather than content that makes us feel bad? And as users, can we reject the content that's making us feel bad? I joined Liz, who's speaking actually later today about her, on the bus, and she spoke about the idea of making sure that the attraction by having good social examples for a child to watch certain content should be something that we work on, to make their heroes become more good role models, if you want. And I think that's probably the way to do it. It's not to try and change the current infrastructure, it's to change the stream on top of the infrastructure.
Jim, when we look at, the content and whoever's responsibility it is, yes, the vulnerable teenage tween group, but also marginalized people in communities. Sunil mentioned about how it's become the babysitter, and I've seen my niece hand over the phone to her little boy, and at 2 years of age, I mean, he's completely absorbed. And he's sort of, well, he looks happy. But, but the marginalized sort of members of society, whereby a lot of parents can monitor, but then a lot of parents can't and don't.
That's true. And so, by the way, in the toy business, they would call this a shut-up toy. It's like, here, go do this. Go hold on to this so I can go do whatever I need to do. True. But let me frame this, because I think that Mo and Sunil are both raising really good points. There are 4 things. Remember, I run the largest group in the world that focuses on digital literacy and citizenship, has about 150 million users who go there to rate technology, movies, TV, video games. And here's what I would say we've learned. There are 4 things. Fundamentally, every young person, really from kindergarten up, needs to be trained in digital literacy and citizenship. You literally, it's important. You would not let your kids drive a car without taking driver's education. So you need to have driver's ed for the internet and social media. And actually, Common Sense created that field. We call it digital literacy. It's in 85% of the schools in the United States. We should bring it here to Saudi Arabia and all across the... And it's, by the way, a very balanced approach. It's about digital well-being. But number 1, we have to educate young people, because they're smart. You just saw the last panel. They are really intelligent, but they need the information. And they need to know, by the way, how they are being manipulated sometime by platforms and product. Number 2, to your point, Sunil, you absolutely have to hold industry accountable. So we are the biggest advocacy group on these issues in the US and in Europe. Right now, Europe is passing laws that are actually about design. They actually require companies, Europe's going to pass this year, that require companies to design products with the user's well-being in mind. But we also need to see privacy legislation. You need to see accountability for misinformation and disinformation, which is a big issue in the United States, but I imagine in many of the countries that you all represent. So fundamental number 2, in addition to digital literacy and digital citizenship for all kids, you need to hold the companies accountable, and you need to do that via regulation. So government has a very important role to play for sure. You do need to think about both laws that make sense for your particular culture or country, and also how we take the benefits of technology, but then we regulate its usage among people. It can't simply be the wild, wild west and trust that the companies are going to do the right thing and that your kids are going to do the right thing. There has to be a discipline that's a legislative discipline. And finally, looking at the audience, parents, teachers, and grandparents most of whom did not grow up with this device, also need to be educated. So there's a degree to which it's a whole community approach. You have to do all four, though. And the truth is, and Eithne can play a huge leadership role in this, because people want information. They want to be empowered. It's extraordinary the advantages and positive facts that tech can bring to our lives. But we need a comprehensive approach, a community-based approach. And if we do that, then the happiness we're talking about, the well-being we're talking about will actually come.
Sunil, talk about this. Whose responsibility is it? I'll come to you in a moment, Mo. Again, what should government do? And I know we're having a panel later on, and there is even the concept of the right of privacy for children. There's a whole debate going on there too. You know, so what can we do in terms of bringing regulation in that's fair, that's just for everybody, and that actually becomes the win-win?
I think when you look at these kinds of, regulation, let's not forget the fact that technology has completely changed how we live, and in a very big positive way. So let's not say, oh, let's not look at the evil side. It has provided information. It's a great leveler. It's just changed how people look and live their lives brilliantly. And when you see the positivity is more in the developing world in the survey than so much in the developed world. So you can see that it has benefited, it's got people there. So when you look at any kind of legalized law, things like that, I think the focus should be on balance. I think we should use the positive sides, make sure that people take great advantage of technology. It's a great tool for learning and living better and progressing in life, but also balance it out with making sure that it doesn't impact the way we actually are able to, especially for the youth, the generation, especially young, impressionable minds, are controlled. This, as Jim said, is not a government alone responsibility. Very clearly you said it is, in fact, a community responsibility.
It is, but you wouldn't let your children, you wouldn't trust Mark Zuckerberg to take care of your children.
Not at all.
And if you would, you're crazy.
But I love what you also say about drawing the fact that, yes, we should take driver's lessons before we drive. And if you say to every kid in the world right now, would you like to drive at 15? They'd probably say, yeah, why not?
Right.
But there's a reason that there is limits and there's education and all of that. Mo, come in on this in terms of responsibility and, legislation. But also, yes, we're talking about the science of digital well-being, but, from where you start to, in terms of the concept, of happiness, I think I want to bring a little bit of both in there, because we have to look at it more holistically, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all about happiness, so I'd hate to talk about the negative side. I don't want us to forget who's in power here. We think that government is in power. Good luck with that. Okay, you think that there are not creative technologists that will build something that complies with the legislation. I think you're missing out, right? Mark Zuckerberg is Mark Zuckerberg because he's going to find a way. That's the truth, okay? And the truth is, unless we legislate for screen time, so basically tell Facebook, called Meta now, unless we tell them, by the way, you're going to double your taxes if you don't, if your users stay more than an hour a day on your devices or your services, then they're going to continue to find a way. And by the way, they're going to find a way to even escape that, right? I'm not at all in disagreement, Jim. I think it's a disaster. But in all honesty, if I'm trying to find a positive solution, I think the positive solution resides with the users. I love the idea of get a screen time license. Seriously, right? Like Sunil said, get intervention. Like, if you have a drug abuse problem, you go to rehabilitation somewhere, right? True. And I want to put the responsibility firmly in the hands of the users. I'm to blame, okay? I spend a lot of screen time, on average 4 hours a day. Perhaps my job requires me to be on social media and so on. Excuses, but the reality is I am to blame. Right? And I'm struggling with all of the, the knowledge I have about happiness and well-being and so on. I struggle to make it less than 4 hours. I get messages, I get, emails and so on and so forth. It is a very complex problem, but I think it is a problem that we as a community, okay, should champion across to each other. I think, I think all of the efforts are needed, but sort of in my limited mind, because I've seen the dark side, if you want, I would probably say that the bigger chances of success would be from our own discipline, from the fact that sadly in the streets of New York or whatever, you can always find drugs, but there are so many people that are not druggies, okay? And the idea of getting us there is where we want to be.
Sunil, we look at what's happening in the world and everybody seems to say that technology will resolve everything. Can technology resolve this, or do we almost, as Mo says, need to come back to basics and have these conversations and bring it home to fundamentals?
I don't think technology will resolve it. I think the power of the human mind is something that none of us have really understood. I think the human beings will have to find a solution because our natural instinct is to protect our children, and if we are responsible parents, and these are the same parents that work in private sector, in governments, we will do the right thing. So technology will get into your minds and take all your money away. You're right, Mark Zuckerberg, you can't leave Mark Zuckerberg to take your responsibility for parenting. It's just, it's a tool to keep kids occupied. But the truth is, I think we need to be able to look at it as a community responsibility. The human mind will have to find a solution. That's how, and we have to do it responsibility.
And I do think why Eithne has called this a movement, the way you framed it, is right. Because it's a broad-based movement. Yeah. It has to involve all sectors of the community if we're going to successfully take advantage of the great benefits of technology, and we're going to limit the downsides.
Absolutely. Yes. This is the worst time of the session, because I got to wrap it up for you here. If there's something that all of us here can really do today to make sure that we're heading in the right direction and we take the very best from the great tools that we have, what would you say it is?
I'd say support Eithne. Thank you so much for doing this. I think we need more Eithnes. I think we need more commitment across all of us. It's not that grim, by the way, because nobody ties me to a tree in the morning and hands me a phone and says, unless you do 4 hours, we're not going to let you go. So it's also our personal choice. We need to become role models for each other. And we will end up with 2 groups. We will end up with a group that's still drug addicted and another group that says, I don't want to be part of this anymore.
Sunil, the pros, the cons, the great negatives, sadly, but the huge positives too. But again, what can we do? What can we all maybe do to just be more aware? Because even getting ready for this event, I've become so much more aware.
Absolutely. I think, I've been meeting a number of different speakers who are here. I think some of the best experts are here. I think this summit should look at this problem in a very serious way and come out with a charter of action. And I think this could be promoted across. It's the first step in a journey to be able to bring balance in our lives. There's so much of beautiful things, of happiness that you can do with your social life, with your family. Let's not lose that. Let's not lose that. While use the benefits of technology. Absolutely. Creating that balance. And I think this summit on these learned speakers can help create that charter, and it's the beginning of our journey to be able to help people live a much more happier, balanced life.
Jim, I'm going to leave you a closing word here in terms of perhaps a call to action.
Okay. So I would actually frame it in light of what a number of my colleagues have said up here, which is, at the end of the day, think about this in the context of children. Because at the end of the day, they are who are going to inherit this world that we're describing. I'm the father of 4. I run a really large company. I'm a professor. But at the end of the day, I'm a father. And about 15 years ago, when I first went into the field of child advocacy, a colleague and I wrote a poem. So I'm going to read it to you, and it's about children. This is how I'd like to end. Because I think it cuts across all cultures and all societies, and it reminds us where it really starts. It's called A Prayer for Children. We pray for children who sneak popsicles before supper, who erase holes in their math workbooks, who throw tantrums in the grocery store and pick at their food, who like ghost stories, and who can never find their shoes. And we pray for those who stare at photographers from behind barbed wire, who can't bound down the street in a new pair of sneakers, who are born in places we wouldn't be caught dead in, who never go to the circus, who live in an X-rated world. We pray for children who sleep with a dog and bury the goldfish, who bring us sticky kisses and fistfuls of dandelions, who get visits from the tooth fairy, who hug us in a hurry and forget their lunch money. And we pray for those who never get dessert, who have no safe blanket to drag behind them, who watch their parents watch them die, who can't find any bread to steal, who don't have any rooms to clean up, whose pictures aren't on anybody's dresser, whose monsters are real. We pray for children who spend all of their allowance before Tuesday, who shove dirty clothes under the bed and never rinse out the bathtub, who don't like to be kissed in front of the carpool, who squirm in church or temple, and who scream into their cell phones, whose tears we sometimes laugh at, and whose smiles can make us cry. And we pray for those whose nightmares come in the daytime, who will eat anything, who have never seen a dentist, who aren't spoiled by anybody, who go to bed hungry and cry themselves asleep, who live and move but have no being. We pray for children who want to be carried and for those who must, for those children whom we never give up on, and for those who don't get a second chance, for those whom we smother with love, and for those who will grab the hand of anybody kind enough to offer it. So I would tell you, if you look at this through children and you build the movement and community that you're thinking of, and we lift up all children, then we will all be far better for it in the end. Thank you guys very much for having me. Shukran.
What a lovely way to close. Thank you so much. Jim, Sunil, Mo, thank you all for your great insight and for sharing your great experience and bringing this to life. I hope we've engaged, informed, educated, hopefully inspired you a little bit. This is just the start. We have so many great speakers coming up. So once again, thank you all for being with us for this morning session. And gentlemen, thank you so much. It's been great to be here. Thank you.